All right, guys, so welcome back. So now we've got the big hitting Bryson Dechambeau. We're going to have a real close look at what he does in his golf swing. So as we've seen over the last couple of years, he's really bulked up his body. He was already an above average hitter on tour, but as you can see now, he actually bulked right up, and it was almost like he'd gotten a little bit too heavy, a bit too much weight, and now he's really cut down. You can see the muscles really protruding through now, so he hits the ball a mile, and we're going to see exactly what he does here in his golf swing. Let's see if it's more than just brute force. All right, so straight away, as I can see here, I can see that he stands up a little bit taller than most. Okay, so usually we try and advocate trying to get your spine angled around that 45-degree angle. So he's probably just up a little bit taller there. Okay, and we know that his lie angles with his clubs are quite upright. Okay, so you can see that he keeps his hands quite high. So therefore, he needs to have his lie angles quite upright when he does it. And I know that I've heard Bryson talk about trying to keep a one-plane swing. So everything that he does in his golf game, very, very intelligent. He's really worked it out after, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hours of practice. Try and work out the perfect system for himself. And straight away, we can see that those hands are quite high at address. Okay, so that's something we can really notice straight away. His hands are a little bit more on the far distance from the body that we've seen with a lot of other tour pros. So he keeps his arms quite extended down to the ball. Usually you see the hands a little bit lower, so you see the hands drop down closer to the body there, but he really tries to keep that almost that right arm fairly straight all the way down to the golf ball. Okay, so let's see what he does here. Let's see if he does anything different on the takeaway. We've already seen that with all the elite tour pros, it's pretty much stock standard to the first position. Sometimes a little bit different at the top, but let's see what happens. Okay, so we can see the same thing, and almost with Bryson, a bit like Rory, they tend to push their hands out a little bit away from the body. Just a little bit, okay? Now, also, if we can see this, actually, let's just have a little bit of a closer look. Right. Looks like his hips might be a tad open to the left here. The reason why I say that is I can't really see his left knee at address. Okay, so it's very, very minute, but his hips and his knees might be open to his feet line by 2 or 3 degrees. So we're not talking about much here, but you can just tell. So when I say that the hands go out from the body, it may not be necessarily true if the hips were square. Okay, but let's just say I reckon they probably pushed out just a smidge. All right, so let's go up here. All right, so we're getting to his first position when the club reaches parallel to the ground. Now, out of everyone that I've seen so far, it takes him the longest time out of everyone I've seen to get to parallel to the ground. So what that is saying is that he doesn't really have a lot of wrist hinge. He basically keeps his left arm reasonably straight without much wrist hinge to that first position. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what will have to happen is that his wrist will set at some point, which will most likely happen at the top of his swing. Okay, so again, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, so his club face there is, it's parallel to his spine angle, which basically means that his club face is square, okay? And you can tell there that his left arm is not that close to his chest. So his left arm and his arms in general are quite away from his body. So usually you see the arms, like you see Tiger, you see, Justin Thomas, Max Homa, they're staying fairly close to their body, their arms and their body on the way back. But his arms tend to push out a little bit. Okay. So now let's get to the top of his swing. And you can see there, as he's taking the club back, his hips are turning. So that's very much the same. He's turning his hips quite a lot already. Gets to about hip height. Gets to about... His hands are around shoulder height there. And we can see now that his hips stop moving. Okay, so his hands get to shoulder height. His hips stop moving. And his arms keep going. Now, and you can also see that the arms are starting to get more behind the body, like we've seen before. Okay, so his hips have turned quite a lot. Now, the reason why the hips have stopped and the upper half has kept going, basically, when you do that, you're creating X factor. And what we call about X factor is basically the difference between the hip turn and the shoulder turn. And they always talk about if you can create X factor, create a difference between the amount that the shoulder turns or the upper half versus the hip turn, you're going to create a lot of power through the ball. Okay, there's going to be a lot of force generated. You don't want your hips to keep turning all the way to the top of your swing, because the thing is, if you do that as well, you tend to move the path back too far around the body. So you want to have your hips kind of stop at around that 45-degree angle. And then your upper half tends to torque and keep going from there until the left shoulder basically gets underneath the chin. So that kind of difference between the hip turn and the shoulder turn of the upper half creates a lot of power, a lot of resistance, and therefore they create more length on the way through. So as we can see here, we've seen another person, as we've been dissecting other pro swings, who has a cross-the-line swing. So cross-the-line simply means that the shaft is pointing out to the right at the top of their swing. Okay? So he gets to that first position. Then after that, his shaft tends to get across the line. Okay, so the thing is, what we've seen so far, people who tend to get across the line at the top of their swing, most of the time, they tend to get a little bit steeper coming down to try and rectify that. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with coming across the line. You just got to be careful that the traditional coming across the line can be like a normal amateur, a person who is probably not as aware of their positions or how they should fix it coming down, might actually start hooking the ball quite a lot, because the more you cross the line, you are in danger of having the club head too much behind your hands coming down, which can cause you to flip the club. Okay, now let's see what Bryson does here. Okay, so I'm going to draw a line down from his hands down to the ball. Okay, so as he brings those hands underneath that white line, so there's no trying to push the hands over the top here. Hands are coming underneath it. He's really rotating hard to the left with his body. Okay, so you can see here that the shaft is a little higher above his right elbow. Okay, so he's really trying to hit either a fade, or I know that Bryson likes to hit very straight shots. So you can see here, he went from a cross-the-line position at the top, which can make the shaft get more underneath the right elbow coming down, so more there. It can make it do that, but because Bryson is turning so hard to the left as he comes down with his body, it will tend to steepen the shaft angle coming down. So you can see there it's higher above the right elbow. So he's really trying to get everything back in a line again. Okay, let's keep going. Let's just check that club face as well. Club face is basically pointing straight up to the sky, so it's very straight. Okay, so he's back in that position, a parallel to the ground. And it's interesting, isn't it? So his position here to getting parallel to the ground on the way down is lower than where he was on the backswing getting parallel to the ground when he went up. So when he was up getting parallel to the ground, we identified it was just below his shoulder line. So what this means is that he's created a lot of wrist lag coming down to get that parallel to the ground now. At a bat, where you'll see most tour pros, that's pretty much where you'll see every tour pro again getting parallel to the ground on the way down. And that's because he's starting to really create a lot of wrist lag as he comes back down. Again, you can see his left arm is quite a long way away from his body there. Okay, so he would have to be careful getting a little bit steep sometimes with his arms that far away from his body. Okay, now he's coming down. So you can see everything's very much in a line here. So he's done a great job trying to get that club head in line with his hands just before impact. Now he's going to rotate through. Well, to me, without being on track, man, it looks very much, very, very straight. Yeah, it's very, very straight through here. All right. Turning his body, so he's extremely athletic. So he turns his core, turns his glutes really well through the ball. Let's just check to see as he comes back down. Let's just draw a line on the back of his glutes. Okay, so he pushes back a little bit on the backswing. Okay. Now, before he comes down, before we see it, what you'll see with the real elite players is that line that I've drawn on his glute line. You'll see the best players in the world tend to push even further back than that white line coming down, or they'll stay on that white line as they rotate through. The only one at the top level that I've seen that doesn't really do that so far, I haven't dissected everybody's swing, obviously, is someone like Luke Donald, who tends to come in a little bit. So let's just see what happens here. All right, so that's coming through impact. We pause at impact now. He's pretty much exactly the same point. Okay, so he pushed back a little bit on the backswing, and at the time of impact, he's very much on, we call it the chair. So when people move their hips toward the ball, so let's say he moved his glutes where the second line is, so he pushed forward toward the ball, that's when you're in danger of hitting the heel, and that's when you can get really flippy and you don't turn your body properly through the ball. So this is a real indicator of someone who has a real tour level swing. So you'll see this with the elite tour players. They make sure that they're turning their body and keeping their spine angle right up until impact. So he's done a phenomenal job there, turning his through. And if I'm standing if you really want to know if someone's turning their body properly and maintaining spine angle, you should be able to see their left glute or their left cheek at impact. That basically means that they've cleared their body. Okay, and what we can also see why Bryson's very stable through the ball and would generate power, he keeps his right foot on the ground. Look at that. Okay, so he's keeping it really much on the ground there, and now he's going to let it rise up. So that means he's keeping all the pressure inside his right foot. Then the right heel starts to come just above the ground, just before impact. Now he goes through. All right, everybody. So after dissecting many, many golf swings, we can see some real clear similarities. First of all, that first position is very much the same. The way they get their club to the first position. Now, there's been different variances. We've seen Tony Finau, he has a very early wrist set, and you can see that he has a very short golf swing, Tony Finau, whereas Bryson has a very late wrist set. So we can see he gets to parallel to the ground later in his golf swing. But the trends here and what they do is very much the same. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you tune in for the next dissection of another Elite Tour Pro swing.